The dust billowed around the train platform as the setting sun painted the horizon in fierce oranges and reds. Daisy Montgomery clutched her small leather satchel tighter to her chest, her pale blue dress fluttering against her ankles in the warm evening breeze. For 3 days she had waited at this desolate station in Promise Creek, Colorado, her determined eyes scanning each arriving train, her heart sinking with each departure. It was 1879, and the West was still wild enough to make a woman alone an object of curiosity or worse. "Madam, the last train's pulled out for today," called the station master, locking the ticket office door. "You've been here since Tuesday. Either you're running from someone or—" He trailed off, shaking his head as he walked away. Daisy didn't answer. Her gaze remained fixed on the empty tracks stretching into the distance like a promise unfulfilled. The small town behind her was beginning to light its evening lamps, and she knew she would need to return to the boarding house soon. Another night, another day of waiting tomorrow. As twilight deepened, she finally turned to leave and nearly collided with a tall figure who had approached soundlessly behind her. "Pardon me, miss," came a deep voice, gentle despite its roughness. "Couldn't help but notice you've been waiting here for days." She looked up into eyes the color of a summer storm, set in a face weathered by sun and wind. He wore a worn leather vest over a simple shirt, dusty trousers tucked into scuffed boots, and a wide-brimmed hat that cast shadows across his features in the fading light. A gun belt sat low on his hips, not unusual in these parts, but the way he carried himself suggested he knew how to use it. "I'm Ranger McCord," he said, touching the brim of his hat respectfully. "Town sheriff asked me to check on you." His eyes, kind despite their wariness, studied her face. "You running from someone, madam, or waiting for me?" The unexpected question, part jest, part genuine inquiry, caught Daisy off guard. For the first time in days, a small smile touched her lips. "Neither, Mr. McCord, though I suppose I am waiting for someone, just not you." She paused, considering whether to share more. "And perhaps I am running from something, though not in the way you might think." Ranger McCord, she couldn't yet think of him by any first name, nodded slowly. "Well, miss, Promise Creek gets mighty dark at night, and not everyone passing through has honorable intentions. May I escort you to wherever you're staying?" Daisy hesitated only briefly before nodding. "That would be kind. I'm at Mrs. Whittaker's boarding house." They walked in silence for several minutes, the sounds of their footsteps and distant piano music from the saloon the only interruption to the evening quiet. Daisy could feel his occasional glance, assessing, wondering. "You have a name?" he finally asked. Daisy Montgomery." "From back east, I'd wager, by your speech," she nodded. "Boston, originally? Long way from home." "Home is relative, Mr. McCord," he chuckled at that. "Call me Reed. Mr. McCord was my father, and he's been gone 10 years now." When they reached the boarding house, a modest 2-story building with clean curtains in the windows, he stopped at the gate. "Miss Montgomery, I don't mean to pry, but waiting alone at that station isn't safe, whatever or whoever you're waiting for." "Well, sometimes things don't work out as planned out here." Daisy lifted her chin. "He promised he would come, and I believe him." Reed's expression darkened slightly. "A man, then, your husband?" "No," she didn't elaborate. He studied her a moment longer. "Well, Miss Montgomery, Promise Creek isn't much, but we look after our own, even those just passing through. If you need anything, you can find me at the sheriff's office or the Lucky Strike Saloon." "Thank you, Mr. Reed, but I'll be fine." He tipped his hat again. "Hope whoever you're waiting for deserves such loyalty." With that, he turned and disappeared into the gathering darkness, his silhouette merging with the shadows between the buildings. Daisy watched him go, then entered the boarding house, ignoring the curious glances from the other guests in the small parlor. In her modest room, she carefully placed her satchel on the bed and withdrew a folded, wrinkled letter. The handwriting was bold but unsteady, as if written on a moving train. "Dearest Daisy, I've found a place for us. Promise Creek, Colorado. Wait for me at the station. I'll be there by the first week of June. All my love, William." She traced the signature with her fingertip. The letter had arrived 3 months ago, and here she was in the first week of June, waiting as instructed. What William didn't know was that she had less than $10 to her name, enough for perhaps 2 more nights at the boarding house. After that, Daisy pushed the thought away and prepared for bed. Tomorrow, she decided, she would inquire about work in town. Just in case William was delayed, morning came with the sound of roosters and the clattering of wagon wheels on the dusty Main Street. Daisy dressed carefully in her second-best dress, a modest gray with white trim, and pinned her honey-brown hair into a simple but neat arrangement. Her reflection in the small mirror showed a woman of 22, with clear blue eyes that had seen more hardship than they should have, and a determined set to her jaw. After a simple breakfast, she made her way to the general store, the largest business in Promise Creek. A bell tinkled as she entered, and a middle-aged woman with kind eyes looked up from behind the counter. "Good morning, dear. You're the young lady staying at Martha Whittaker's, aren't you? Waiting for someone at the station." News traveled fast in small towns. "Yes, madam, I'm Daisy Montgomery." "Grace Miller, my husband and I run the store." The woman smiled warmly. "What can I help you with today?" "Actually, Mrs. Miller, I was wondering if you knew of any work available in town. Just temporary, you understand." Grace's eyes showed understanding. "Still waiting, but need to make ends meet in the meantime." Daisy nodded, grateful not to have to explain further. "Well, as it happens, my assistant left last month to get married. I could use help around the store stocking shelves, managing inventory, helping customers. Nothing too strenuous, but it's honest work." Relief flooded through Daisy. "That would be perfect, Mrs. Miller. When could I start?" "How about right now? And call me Grace, dear, everyone does." By midday, Daisy had learned the basics of the store's organization and helped several customers. Grace had even insisted on providing lunch-thick sandwiches and fresh lemonade that reminded Daisy how long it had been since she'd eaten properly, trying to stretch her meager funds. During a quiet moment, Grace leaned against the counter. "So, who are you waiting for, if you don't mind my asking?" "A friend," Daisy said carefully. "From back east. He wrote that he'd found a place for us here." Grace nodded, not pushing for more details. "Well, Promise Creek is small, but it's growing. Good place to start fresh." The bell over the door jingled, and Daisy looked up to see Reed McCord entering, his tall frame filling the doorway. He removed his hat as he stepped inside, revealing thick dark hair that curled slightly at the temples. His eyes found hers immediately. "Miss Montgomery, Mrs. Miller." He nodded to each of them. "Didn't expect to see you here, Miss Montgomery. Miss Daisy is helping me in the store," Grace explained. "What can we get for you today, Ranger?" "Just picking up some supplies." He moved through the store, selecting items methodically: coffee, ammunition, tobacco, a new shirt. As Grace tallied his purchases, he addressed Daisy again. "No train today. I'll go after my shift ends," she replied, aware of Grace's curious gaze shifting between them. Reed paid for his items and gathered the package Grace had wrapped. "I'll be riding out to check on the Pearson place later. Heard rumors of cattle rustlers in the area." He paused. "If your friend arrives today, tell him to be careful on the road north of town." Daisy nodded. "I will, thank you." After he left, Grace gave Daisy a knowing smile. "Reed McCord is a good man, best tracker in 3 counties, they say. Texas Ranger for years before he came here. He seems capable," Daisy said neutrally. Grace laughed. "Half the unmarried women in town would agree with that assessment, dear. But he keeps to himself mostly. Lost someone, I think, though he never speaks of it." The rest of the afternoon passed quickly, and true to her word, Daisy went to the station after work. As on previous days, she watched the arriving train, scanning the faces of disembarking passengers. And as on previous days, William was not among them. This pattern continued for a week. Daisy worked at the store during the day and waited at the station each evening. Her neat appearance began to show signs of wear the same 2 dresses worn alternately, her hair less carefully arranged as fatigue set in. But she continued to wait, her determination unwavering. On her 8th day in Promise Creek, a Saturday, the town was busier than usual with ranchers and farmhands coming in for supplies and entertainment. The saloons were doing brisk business, and even the general store saw steady traffic throughout the day. You should take the afternoon off, Grace suggested around noon. You've worked hard all week and Saturday evenings get rowdy, no place for a young lady. I don't mind, Daisy protested. Besides, I need to catch the evening train. Grace's expression softened. Daisy, dear. Have you considered that he might not be coming? The words struck like a physical blow. He promised, Daisy said quietly. Men make promises they can't always keep, especially out here, Grace replied gently. Life in the West, it changes plans, accidents happen, routes change. William wouldn't break his promise without reason, Daisy insisted. If he hasn't come, there's a good explanation. Grace squeezed her hand. I hope you're right, dear, I truly do. When Daisy left the store that evening, the town had transformed. Music spilled from the saloons, men called to each other across the street, and horses and wagons crowded the hitching posts. She kept her head down as she made her way toward the station, uncomfortable with the occasional whistles and comments directed her way. Miss Montgomery. She turned to see Reed McCord approaching, leading his horse. Unlike most men in town that evening, he appeared completely sober, his movements precise and controlled. Evening, Reed, she said, having gradually become comfortable using his first name during their brief daily interactions. Heading to the station. When she nodded, he frowned. Not the best night to be out alone, towns full of cowboys with a month's pay burning holes in their pockets. As if to prove his point, a crash sounded from the nearest saloon, followed by shouting and the sound of breaking glass. I can handle myself, Daisy assured him, though the commotion made her nervous. Reed tied his horse to a nearby post. I'll walk with you. His tone made it clear this wasn't a request. They walked in silence for a moment before he spoke again. Grace tells me you're working at the store now. Yes, she's been very kind. She's good people. He hesitated. Look, Miss Montgomery, Daisy, it's been over a week, whoever you're waiting for. His name is William, she said abruptly, and he will come. Reed stopped walking, causing her to pause as well. In the fading light, his expression was difficult to read. William who? Something in his tone made her wary. William Blake. Why? Reed's face remained impassive, but something flickered in his eyes. From Boston, Daisy's heart quickened. You know him. For a long moment, Reed said nothing, his gaze searching her face. Finally, he shook his head. Name sounds familiar, that's all. How do you know this William? She hesitated, then decided there was little harm in telling him. We grew up together, our families were close. This was a simplification of a much more complicated truth. When my parents died last year, leaving nothing but debts, William helped me. He said he'd find us a place out west, away from— She stopped abruptly. Away from what? Reed prompted gently. It doesn't matter. She resumed walking toward the station. He'll be here. At the station, they found the platform more crowded than usual. Saturday's train carried mail and supplies along with passengers. Daisy took her customary position near the edge, scanning each face as people disembarked. Reed stood a few paces behind her, his presence oddly comforting in the crowd. When the last passenger had descended and the train began preparing for departure, Daisy felt the now familiar wave of disappointment wash over her. Miss Montgomery. She turned to find Reed holding out a telegram. This came for you yesterday. Station master asked me to give it to you, said he couldn't find you. With trembling fingers, Daisy took the yellow paper. The message was brief. Delayed, stop business complications, stop wait for me, stop William. Relief and anxiety battled within her. He was alive, at least, but delayed could mean days or weeks. Her dwindling resources wouldn't last much longer, even with her new employment. Bad news? Reed asked, watching her expression. He's delayed, she said, folding the telegram carefully, but he's coming. Reed nodded, though something in his manner suggested skepticism. It's getting dark. Let me walk you back to Mrs. Whittaker's. They had just turned away from the station when shouts erupted from the street ahead. A group of drunk cowboys were arguing loudly, their dispute quickly escalating to pushing and shoving. As Daisy and Reed approached, one man drew his gun. In a flash, Reed pushed Daisy behind him and drew his own weapon. That's enough, gentlemen, he called, his voice carrying a note of authority that cut through the chaos. Put the iron away before someone gets hurt. The men turned, momentarily stunned by the interruption. The one with the drawn gun, a young man barely out of his teens, wavered uncertainly. "Don't be stupid, boy," Reed said evenly. "You're drunk and angry, and that's a bad combination with a loaded gun. Put it down and you walk away without seeing the inside of a cell tonight." For a tense moment, Daisy thought the young cowboy might refuse. Then, slowly, he holstered his weapon. "Didn't mean nothing by it," he muttered. "Go sober up," Reed ordered. The group dispersed, grumbling but compliant. Reed holstered his own gun with practiced ease. "Sorry about that," he said to Daisy. "Saturday nights bring out the worst in some folks." "Thank you," she said quietly. "You handled that well. Part of the job." But there was a tightness around his eyes that suggested the encounter had affected him more than he let on. As they continued toward the boarding house, Daisy found herself studying Reed's profile in the dim light. There was something reassuring about his presence, a steadiness, a reliability that contrasted sharply with the uncertainty that had defined her life recently. "Why did you become a ranger?" she asked suddenly. The question seemed to surprise him. "Believed in the law, I suppose." "Wanted to make a difference." He gave a short laugh. "Sounds foolish when I say it out loud." "It doesn't," Daisy assured him. "It sounds honorable." They reached Mrs. Whittaker's gate, and Reed stopped as he always did, respecting the boundary. "Get some rest, Daisy. Sunday's usually quieter in town." "Will I see you tomorrow?" The question escaped before she could consider its implications. Something warmed in his gaze. "I expect so. Good night, Miss Montgomery." "Good night, Reed." Inside her room, Daisy reread William's telegram, trying to decipher meaning from the sparse words. Business complications could mean anything. Had he encountered trouble? Was he in danger? The questions swirled in her mind, keeping sleep at bay until exhaustion finally claimed her in the early hours of the morning. Sunday dawned clear and warm. The store was closed, giving Daisy her first full day off since she'd started working. After attending the small church service, more to meet townspeople than from any deep religious conviction, she found herself with hours to fill before the afternoon train. She was sitting on a bench outside the general store, enjoying the sunshine, when a shadow fell across her. Looking up, she found Reed McCord standing there, looking different without his gun belt, dressed in a clean white shirt and dark trousers. "Miss Montgomery," he greeted her, hat in hand. "Thought you might like to see a bit more of Promise Creek than just the main street and the train station." Daisy hesitated. "I don't want to miss the train. It doesn't arrive until 4, plenty of time for a short ride." He gestured to where 2 horses stood hitched nearby. "Unless you'd rather not." The idea of escaping the confines of the small town, if only for a few hours, was suddenly appealing. "I'd like that," she decided, "but I should warn you, it's been years since I've ridden." Reed's smile transformed his face, erasing the hard lines and revealing a glimpse of a younger, less burdened man. "Don't worry. Marigold there is gentle as a lamb." The mare he indicated was indeed gentle, plodding patiently as Daisy reacquainted herself with the basics of horsemanship. Reed rode a larger, more spirited stallion, but kept the pace slow as they left the town behind, following a winding trail into the surrounding countryside. "It's beautiful," Daisy breathed as they crested a small rise, revealing a panoramic view of the valley below. The landscape was so different from the crowded streets of Boston Open, wild, untamed. "Different from what you're used to, I expect," Reed commented. "Very, but there's something freeing about it." They dismounted near a small stream, allowing the horses to drink while they sat on a fallen log. Reed pointed out distant landmarks, a mountain range, a neighboring town, the route the stagecoach took. "How long have you been in Promise Creek?" Daisy asked. "About 2 years now. Came here after leaving the Rangers." He pulled a blade of grass, twisting it between his fingers. "Needed somewhere quiet." "Why did you leave the Rangers?" Reed was silent for a long moment. "Lost my partner in a gunfight. Started questioning whether what we were doing made any difference." He tossed the grass aside. "So I handed in my badge and drifted for a while, ended up here." "I'm sorry about your partner," Daisy said softly. He nodded acknowledgement. "Your turn. What brought you out west, really? And don't say just William Blake." Daisy sighed, considering how much to reveal. After my parents died, I discovered they had been living well beyond their means for years. The creditors took everything our home, the furnishings, even my mother's jewelry. William was, she hesitated. He was engaged to marry me. Reed's expression remained neutral, but she noticed his hands tightened slightly on his knees. It was an arrangement between our families, she continued. But when I lost everything, his parents opposed the match. They forbade him to see me. Her voice hardened. William defied them. He said he'd find us a place where their influence couldn't reach, where we could start fresh. He left Boston 6 months ago with the promise that he'd send for me when he was established. And he chose Promise Creek. Reed sounded skeptical. Apparently, his letter said he'd found the perfect place for us. Reed was quiet for a moment, and if he doesn't come? The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. He will, Daisy insisted, but her voice lacked its usual certainty. They rode back to town in companionable silence, arriving with plenty of time before the train. As Reed helped her dismount, his hands lingering briefly at her waist, Daisy found herself wishing the afternoon could have lasted longer. "Thank you," she said. "I enjoyed seeing more of the area." "My pleasure." His eyes held hers for a moment longer than necessary. "I'll walk with you to the station." The afternoon train arrived precisely on time, steam billowing across the platform as it ground to a halt. As always, Daisy scanned each face with hope that gradually faded as the last passenger disembarked. "No, William, I'm sorry," Reed said simply. "There's always tomorrow," Daisy replied, the words sounding hollow even to her own ears. That evening, as she prepared for bed, a knock came at her door. Mrs. Whittaker stood there, her expression apologetic. "Miss Montgomery, I hate to bring this up, but you've been with us over a week now." Daisy's heart sank. "You need payment for another week." "I'm afraid so, dear. I've been as accommodating as I can, but I have expenses to meet. Of course, I understand." Daisy retrieved her purse and counted out most of her remaining money. "Will this cover it, Mrs.?" Whittaker nodded, though her eyes held concern. "Yes, but dear, if your gentleman friend doesn't arrive soon." "I'll figure something out," Daisy assured her, though she had no idea what that might be. After Mrs. Whittaker left, Daisy sat on the edge of her bed, reality finally sinking in. She had less than $2 to her name, enough for perhaps one meal. If William didn't arrive in the next few days, she would be destitute in a town where she knew almost no one. For the first time since arriving in Promise Creek, Daisy allowed herself to cry. Monday morning dawned gray and threatening rain. Daisy dressed mechanically, her eyes puffy from a night of intermittent tears. At the general store, Grace took one look at her and immediately bustled her into the back room for tea. "You look exhausted, dear. Are you unwell?" Daisy shook her head. "Just worried." Understanding dawned in Grace's kind eyes. "Your young man still hasn't arrived." When Daisy nodded, Grace patted her hand. "And I'm guessing funds are getting low." "Very," Daisy admitted. "Well, no need to worry about room and board. You can move into the room above the store. It's small but comfortable, and I'll increase your wages." Daisy was overwhelmed by the unexpected kindness. "Mrs. Miller, Grace, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll accept. The room is just gathering dust and I could use the extra help." Grace smiled warmly. "Promise Creek looks after its own, Daisy, and you're one of us now, whether your William arrives or not." The offer was a reprieve Daisy hadn't dared hope for. "Thank you, truly." That afternoon, as Daisy was arranging a display of fabric, the bell over the door jingled. She looked up to see Reed entering, his expression serious. "Afternoon, Ranger," Grace called from behind the counter. "What brings you by?" "Information," Reed replied, his eyes finding Daisy. "Miss Montgomery, could I speak with you outside for a moment?" Something in his tone sent a chill through her. "Of course." On the boardwalk outside the store, Reed led her a few steps away from the entrance. His face was grim, his eyes troubled. "Daisy, I received a telegram from a colleague in Denver this morning. I asked him to look into something for me." He hesitated. "It's about William Blake." Daisy's heart lurched. "Is he hurt? Has something happened?" Reed's expression didn't change. "William Blake was in Denver 3 weeks ago. He stayed at the Grand Hotel, made some business inquiries around town." He paused. "He wasn't alone, Daisy." "What do you mean?" But a cold dread was already spreading through her. He was traveling with a woman. They registered as Mr. and Mrs. Blake. The world seemed to tilt beneath Daisy's feet. There must be some mistake. Perhaps it was another William Blake. My colleague is thorough. He obtained a description. Reed's voice softened. I'm sorry, Daisy, but it appears your fiancé has moved on. Daisy shook her head, denial rising like a tide. No, I don't believe it. William wouldn't, he promised. Her voice broke. Reed reached for her, but she stepped back. I need to be alone, she whispered, turning blindly toward the boarding house. She wasn't sure how she made it back to her room, only that somehow she did, locking the door behind her before collapsing onto the bed. The pain was physical, a crushing weight on her chest that made it difficult to breathe. William engaged to another woman. It couldn't be true, and yet, hadn't there been signs? The delayed replies to her letters, the vague instructions, the continued absence with only the briefest explanation. A soft knock at her door roused her from her misery. Daisy, it's Grace. Please let me in, dear. Reluctantly, Daisy unlocked the door. Grace took one look at her tear-streaked face and enfolded her in a motherly embrace. Reed told me, she said softly. I'm so sorry. I don't understand, Daisy sobbed. Why would he send for me if he never intended to come? Grace guided her to sit on the bed. Men can be cruel, dear, or perhaps he did intend to come, but changed his mind. What am I going to do? The question emerged as a broken whisper. First, you're going to move into that room above the store, as we discussed. Then you're going to continue working, building a life here. Grace's voice was firm but gentle. You're stronger than you know, Daisy. This isn't the end, it's a new beginning. That evening, Daisy didn't go to the train station. Instead, she packed her few belongings and moved them to the small but clean room above the general store. It was a simple space, a narrow bed, a washstand, a small table and chair, but it was hers, at least for now. As she unpacked, she came across William's letter, the one that had brought her to Promise Creek. With trembling hands, she held it over the small lamp, watching as the flame caught the corner, consuming his promises word by word. When only ash remained, she felt. Not better exactly, but lighter somehow. Unburdened. The next morning, Daisy rose early, washed her face in cold water, and dressed with particular care. Her reflection showed a woman changed thinner, paler, but with a new determination in her eyes. She would not allow William's betrayal to define her. The store was already open when she descended the stairs, Grace greeting her with an approving nod. You look better today. I feel different, Daisy admitted. Still hurt, still angry, but also free, Grace suggested. Yes. The realization was surprising in its clarity. Free to make my own choices now. The morning passed in a flurry of customers and tasks. Daisy found comfort in the routine, in the simple interactions with townspeople who treated her with increasing familiarity. By noon, she had almost convinced herself that she could build a life here, with or without William Blake. The bell over the door jingled, and Daisy looked up from arranging a display of tinned goods to see Reed entering the store. Her heart gave an unexpected little jump at the sight of him. Miss Montgomery, he greeted her, removing his hat. You're looking well today. Thank you, she replied, unsure what else to say after their last interaction. Reed cleared his throat. I wanted to apologize for yesterday. I should have been more tactful. You were honest, Daisy said quietly. I needed to hear the truth, even if it hurt, he nodded, studying her face. Still, I'm sorry for the pain it caused you. Don't be. In a way, you've set me free. She managed a small smile. I've decided to stay in Promise Creek, at least for now. Grace has offered me the room upstairs and steady employment. Something like relief flickered across Reed's features. That's good news. Promise Creek could use more people like you. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of more customers, and Reed departed with a promise to check in later. Throughout the afternoon, Daisy found her thoughts returning to him, his quiet strength, his honesty, the way his eyes crinkled slightly at the corners when he smiled. The realization that she was attracted to Reed McCord came as a shock. It was too soon, she told herself. Her heart was still raw from William's betrayal, and yet, there was something about Reed that called to her, a steadiness that promised safety in a world that had proven anything but secure. As evening approached, Daisy found herself glancing repeatedly at the clock. The train would be arriving soon, the train she had waited for faithfully each day since her arrival. Part of her still wanted to go to see for herself if William might, against all evidence, appear. "Go if you need to," Grace said, noticing her distraction. "Sometimes we need closure." Daisy hesitated, then nodded, just this once, to say goodbye. The station was quieter than usual as Daisy took her familiar position on the platform. The train arrived precisely on time, steam billowing across the wooden boards as it ground to a halt. As always, she scanned each disembarking passenger, though this time without hope, and then, impossibly, she saw him. William Blake looked much as she remembered, handsome, well-dressed, his blonde hair neatly combed beneath an expensive hat. He descended from the train with the confidence of a man accustomed to command, his eyes searching the platform until they landed on her. Daisy. His smile was as charming as ever as he approached. "My darling, I knew you'd wait for me." Daisy stood frozen, unable to believe he was actually there. William, in the flesh. He reached for her hands, but she kept them firmly at her sides. His smile faltered. "Daisy, what's wrong?" "What's wrong?" she repeated, finding her voice at last. "You're asking me what's wrong when you've been in Denver for weeks with another woman." William's face paled beneath his tan. "Who told you that? Does it matter? Is it true?" He had the grace to look ashamed, at least. "It's complicated, Daisy. Helena is the daughter of a business associate. Our relationship is purely strategic, a means to secure investment for our future." "Our future?" Disgust rose in her throat. "You registered as husband and wife, William." "A necessary deception." Her father would never have allowed— "Stop." Daisy held up a hand. "I don't want to hear any more lies." William's expression hardened. "Don't be foolish, Daisy. You have nothing, no money, no family, no prospects. I'm offering you a future." "As what? Your mistress while you marry for advantage." She shook her head. "I deserve better than that." "You'll regret this," William warned, his charming facade cracking to reveal something uglier beneath. "You think you can make a life in this backwater town? You'll be begging me to take you back within a month." "I don't think so." The voice came from behind Daisy. She turned to see Reed standing a few paces away, watching William with undisguised contempt. William's eyes narrowed. "And who might you be?" "Someone who doesn't abandon women he claims to care about," Reed replied evenly, "or lie to them." William's hand moved toward his coat and Reed tensed, his own hand hovering near his holstered gun. For a breathless moment, Daisy thought William might actually draw a weapon. Then, apparently thinking better of it, he relaxed. "Daisy, be reasonable," William pleaded, ignoring Reed. "I came all this way for you." "No," Daisy said firmly. "You came because you thought I would be an easy conquest, a desperate woman with no options. But I'm not desperate anymore, William. I have work, I have friends, I have possibilities." Her gaze flickered briefly to Reed. "Go back to Denver." "Go back to Helena. I release you from any promises you made to me." William's face darkened with anger. "You'll regret this," he repeated. "The only thing I regret is believing in you for so long." Daisy turned away, her heart pounding but her mind clear. "Goodbye, William." She walked away from the platform, away from William Blake, and all he represented: false promises, manipulation, a life built on compromise and deceit. Reed fell into step beside her, silent but supportive. They had gone perhaps 50 yards when William's voice rang out behind them. "McCord." "That's your name, isn't it? The famous Texas Ranger?" Reed stopped, turning slowly. "What of it?" William's smile was vicious. "Just wondering if Daisy knows about your reputation, about what happened in Lerdo." Reed went very still. "That's ancient history." "Is it?" "3 men dead, and some say you fired first." William's voice carried clear in the evening air. "Does she know she's walking with a killer?" Daisy looked up at Reed, confused. His face had gone hard, his eyes cold. "Reed, later," he said quietly. To William he called, "Your train's preparing to leave, Blake. I suggest you be on it." William hesitated, then gave a mocking bow. "As you wish, Ranger, but Daisy," his eyes found hers, "ask him about Lerdo, ask him about the Harper brothers." With that parting shot, William turned and reboarded the train. Minutes later, it pulled away from the station, taking William Blake out of Daisy's life as suddenly as he had re-entered it. They walked in silence back toward town, the weight of William's accusations hanging between them. Finally, at the edge of Main Street, Daisy stopped. "Reed, what did he mean about Lairdo?" Reed's expression was guarded. "It was a long time ago." "I'd like to know." He sighed, removing his hat and running a hand through his hair. 7 years ago, I was tracking a gang of outlaws, the Harper brothers and their crew. They'd robbed banks across 3 states, killed at least 5 people that we knew of. We cornered them in Lairdo." He paused, his eyes distant with memory. "It went bad, fast. When it was over, 3 of them were dead, including 2 of the Harper brothers. And William said you fired first." Reed's jaw tightened. "There was an investigation. Some witnesses claimed I drew without provocation. Others said the Harpers went for their guns first." He looked at her directly. "I know what happened. I didn't murder those men, Daisy, but I did kill them." "Why did you leave the Rangers?" "Not because of Lairdo. That was cleared self-defense. I left years later after my partner was killed." His eyes searched hers. "Does it matter what I was, what I did?" Daisy considered the question carefully. "We all have pasts, Reed. Things we've done, choices we've made. What matters is who we are now." Something in his expression eased. "And who am I now in your eyes?" "A good man," she said simply. "One who tells the truth even when it's difficult. One who helps others without expectation of reward." Reed stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gray in his blue eyes. "Daisy, I know it's too soon. You've just ended things with Blake and you're still finding your footing here, but I want you to know." He hesitated. "I admire you, your courage, your determination, and if you're ready, I'd like to court you properly." The declaration, so different from William's smooth manipulations, touched Daisy deeply. "I think I'd like that," she said softly, "but you're right, I need time." Reed nodded, a smile warming his features. "Time we have plenty of. Promise Creek isn't going anywhere, and neither am I." In the weeks that followed, Daisy settled into life in Promise Creek with growing contentment. Her work at the general store expanded to include bookkeeping, a skill she had learned from her father. Grace and her husband treated her like family, including her in Sunday dinners and introducing her to their wide circle of friends. And Reed. Reed was patient, respectful of her need for space, while making his interest clear in 100 small ways. He brought her wildflowers from his rides around the county, shared books from his personal collection, and always found time to stop by the store, ostensibly for supplies but really to exchange a few words with her. Their first official outing came a month after William's brief appearance. Reed invited her to the town's Founders' Day celebration, a festive affair with music, dancing, and food spread out in the town square. "You look beautiful," he said when he came to escort her, his eyes appreciative as they took in her blue dress, a new one, purchased with her own earnings. "Thank you." Daisy accepted his offered arm, aware of Grace's approving smile as they departed. The celebration was lively, the townspeople welcoming Daisy as one of their own. She danced with Reed beneath lantern light, his hand warm and steady at her waist, his movements surprisingly graceful for such a tall man. "You're a good dancer," she commented, breathless from a particularly energetic reel. "My mother insisted all her sons learn," Reed replied with a grin. "Said no son of hers would embarrass a lady on the dance floor. She sounds formidable." She was. His smile turned wistful. "She'd have liked you, I think. Strong women recognize each other." As the evening progressed, they found a quiet spot away from the music and crowds, sitting on a bench beneath an old oak tree. The night air was cool but pleasant, stars scattered like diamonds across the black velvet sky. "Are you happy here, Daisy?" Reed asked suddenly. She considered the question, surprised to find the answer came easily. "Yes, more than I expected to be. Promise Creek has become home. I'm glad." He took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against hers. "I've been thinking about my future lately." "Oh," Daisy's heart quickened. "The sheriff is retiring next year. He's asked me to consider running for the position." "Reed, that's wonderful. You'd make an excellent sheriff." He smiled at her enthusiasm. "It would mean staying in Promise Creek permanently, setting down roots. Is that what you want?" "I think it is." His eyes held hers in the dim light. "Especially if," Certain other aspects of my life develop as I hope they might. The implication was clear, and Daisy felt a warm glow spread through her. I think those aspects have excellent prospects, Sheriff McCord. Reed's laugh was low and pleased. I haven't won the election yet. You will, she said with certainty, slowly, telegraphing his intentions to give her time to withdraw. Reed leaned closer. His lips, when they met hers, were warm and gentle, the kiss a question as much as a declaration. Daisy answered by leaning into him, her hand rising to rest against his chest, feeling the strong, steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. When they finally parted, Reed rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that for a very long time, he admitted. I'm glad you finally did, Daisy replied, smiling. The months that followed were the happiest of Daisy's life. Her relationship with Reed deepened gradually, built on mutual respect and genuine affection rather than the desperate need that had characterized her attachment to William. They spent evenings on the porch of Grace's home, talking about books, politics, their hopes for the future. Reed taught her to shoot, insisting that every woman in the West should know how to defend herself. In return, Daisy helped him prepare for debates against his election opponent, coaching him on public speaking. As winter approached, Reed was called away to track a gang of outlaws who had robbed the bank in a neighboring town. The separation, though brief, made Daisy realize how completely he had become part of her life, how empty Promise Creek seemed without his steady presence. You've got it bad, Grace teased, finding Daisy staring out the store window for the third time in an hour, watching for any sign of Reed's return. Is it that obvious? Daisy asked, blushing. Only to anyone with eyes, Grace replied with a laugh. He feels the same way, you know. Never seen Reed McCord look at anyone the way he looks at you. The bell over the door jingled, and Daisy's heart leaped, but it was only Mrs. Perkins coming in for her weekly shopping. Trying to hide her disappointment, Daisy greeted the older woman warmly. Any word from our ranger, Mrs. Perkins asked, her eyes twinkling knowingly. Not yet, Daisy admitted, but he should be back any day now. Well, when he returns, you tell him Martha Perkins says he'd better make an honest woman of you soon, or we'll all have something to say about it. Daisy's blush deepened. Mrs. Perkins. Oh, don't act so surprised, dear. The whole town's been watching you two dance around each other for months. We're all just waiting for the announcement. The thought of marriage to Reed, of building a life with him in Promise Creek, filled Daisy with a warm glow that lingered throughout the day. By closing time, however, anxiety had begun to creep in. Reed had been gone for 5 days, 2 more than he'd estimated. I'm sure he's fine, Grace reassured her as they closed up the store. Tracking takes time, and Reed's too experienced to take unnecessary risks. You're right, Daisy agreed, trying to sound more confident than she felt. The sound of hoofbeats interrupted her, and they both turned to see a rider approaching at a gallop. Even in the fading light, Daisy recognized Reed's broad-shouldered silhouette. Relief washed over her, followed immediately by concern as she noticed he was slumped forward in the saddle. Reed! She rushed outside as he reined in his horse, reaching him just as he dismounted, stumbling slightly. I'm all right, he assured her, though his face was drawn with exhaustion and there was a makeshift bandage around his left arm, dark with dried blood. Just a graze. You're hurt, Daisy said, helping him toward the store. Grace, can you already getting the medical supplies? Grace called, disappearing inside. Daisy guided Reed to a chair in the back room, her hands gentle but efficient as she helped him remove his coat and rolled up his sleeve to examine the wound. It was indeed just a graze, but it had bled heavily and looked painful. What happened? She asked, cleaning the injury with warm water. Ambush, Reed replied grimly. They were waiting for us near the canyon. Johnson took a bullet in the shoulder, but he'll recover. We got 3 of them, but 2 escaped. But you're safe now, Daisy said, as much to reassure herself as anything. Reed caught her hand, stilling her movements. Daisy, look at me. She raised her eyes to his, seeing the intensity there. When that bullet hit me, all I could think about was you, he said quietly, about getting back to you, about all the things I haven't said yet. Reed, let me finish. His grip on her hand tightened. I love you, Daisy Montgomery. I think I've loved you since that first day at the train station when you were waiting so faithfully for a man who didn't deserve you." Tears welled in Daisy's eyes. "I love you too," she whispered. "Then marry me." The words came out in a rush. "Be my wife. Build a life with me here in Promise Creek." Joy bubbled up inside her, bright and irrepressible. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I'll marry you." Reed pulled her into a kiss that was both tender and passionate, his arms enfolding her as if he never intended to let go. When they finally parted, both breathless, they found Grace standing in the doorway, medical supplies in hand and a broad smile on her face. "Well," she said, "it's about time." News of their engagement spread through Promise Creek with the speed only possible in a small town. By the following morning, it seemed everyone knew, offering congratulations and good wishes wherever Daisy went. The women of the town immediately began planning a wedding celebration, while the men clapped Reed on the back and teased him good-naturedly about finally being caught. The wedding took place 6 weeks later, on a crisp December morning with snow dusting the ground like sugar. The entire town turned out for the ceremony, held in the small church and followed by a reception at the town hall. Daisy wore a dress of ivory satin that Grace and the other women had helped her make, with tiny pearls sewn into the bodice and a veil of delicate lace. Reed, in a new black suit, looked at her as if she were the only person in the world as she walked down the aisle toward him. Their vows were simple but heartfelt, promises of love, fidelity, and partnership spoken before friends who had become family. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Reed's kiss was a seal on those promises, a commitment as binding as the gold band he had placed on her finger. The celebration lasted well into the evening, with music, dancing, and enough food to feed the town twice over. As twilight deepened into night, Reed led Daisy away from the festivities toward the small house they would now share, a cozy 2-story structure on the edge of town that they had spent the past month preparing together. "Welcome home, Mrs. McCord," Reed said as he carried her over the threshold, setting her gently on her feet in the parlor where a fire blazed welcomingly in the hearth. "It sounds wonderful when you say it," Daisy replied, her arms twining around his neck. "Mrs. McCord." "It is wonderful," he agreed, pulling her close. "Almost as wonderful as you." Later, as they lay together in the quiet darkness of their new home, Daisy reflected on the strange, winding path that had brought her to this moment. Her wait at the train station, a wait for a man who had never truly intended to come, had led her to Reed, to Promise Creek, to a happiness she hadn't known was possible. "What are you thinking about?" Reed asked softly, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "About waiting," she replied. "About how sometimes we wait for the wrong things, only to discover that what we really needed was waiting for us all along." Reed's arms tightened around her. "I would have waited for you forever," he said simply. "You didn't have to," Daisy whispered, nestling closer to him. "I'm right here." The years that followed brought changes to Promise Creek and to the McCords. Reed was elected sheriff, as everyone had predicted, bringing a steady, fair-minded approach to law enforcement that earned him respect throughout the county. Daisy continued working at the general store until the birth of their first child, a daughter they named Grace in honor of the woman who had become like a mother to Daisy. 2 more children followed, a son, James, and another daughter, Elizabeth. Their home, once so new and empty, filled with laughter, toys, and the 1,000 small treasures that make up a family's life together. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Reed surprised Daisy with a trip back to the train station where they had first met. The platform was deserted in the late afternoon sun, the tracks stretching away into the distance just as they had on that fateful day. "Why are we here?" Daisy asked, curious. Reed took her hands in his. "I wanted to bring you back to where it all began. Where I first saw you, waiting so patiently." He smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners in the way she loved. "Do you remember what I asked you?" Daisy's heart warmed at the memory. "You asked if I was running from someone or waiting for you, and you said neither." Reed's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "But it turns out, in a way, you were waiting for me. We just didn't know it yet." "I think part of me did know," Daisy admitted. There was something about you even then. A feeling that you were someone I could trust, someone who would never lie to me or leave me waiting. And I never will, Reed promised, drawing her into his arms, not for a single day of our lives. As the sun set over Promise Creek, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Daisy stood in the circle of her husband's embrace. No longer waiting, but exactly where she was meant to be in the years that followed, Promise Creek grew and prospered, as did the McCord family. Reed served as sheriff for over 2 decades, becoming a respected figure throughout the territory. Daisy, meanwhile, opened a small school, passing on her love of learning to the children of the town, including her own. Their children grew up, strong and true like their parents. Grace, the eldest, married the son of the town doctor and followed in her mother-in-law's footsteps, becoming a midwife known for her gentle hands and calming presence. James joined his father in law enforcement, eventually taking over as sheriff when Reed retired. Elizabeth, the youngest and most adventurous, surprised everyone by going east to attend college, returning with a degree in law and opening the first female-run legal practice in the county. Through it all, the joys and sorrows, the challenges and triumphs, Reed and Daisy remained each other's steadfast partners, their love deepening with each passing year. They became grandparents, welcoming a new generation with open arms and hearts full of love. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the house was still, Reed would find Daisy standing by the window, gazing out at the distant horizon. He would slip his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Waiting for someone?" he would ask softly, echoing that long-ago question. And Daisy would turn in his embrace, her eyes finding his with the same love that had sustained them through the decades. "No," she would answer, reaching up to touch his face, now lined with the years they had shared. "Not anymore. Everything I've ever waited for is right here."